Okay, so thank you very much to the organizer for organizing this very nice event. And I'm very honored to be here today to talk to you about statistical computational trade-offs. Actually, I'm quite happy to discuss about it because it's something that really interests me a lot. And so I would like to try to convey that. So in this talk, I'm mostly going to do a tutorial. But if I have time, I will also present shortly some joint works with Simone Giancola, who just started his PhD in Orsay with Christophe Giraud and Nicolas and myself. Christophe Giraud, who is in Orsay. Max Graf, who is here also and who is finishing his PhD in Potsdam. Emmanuel Pia, who is at NSAI. And Nicolas Verzelen, who I don't need to introduce and who is also here. Okay, so first, statistical computational trade-offs. So this is, I think, now more and more known in the stats community. So it's basically these trade-offs between statistical optimality. So you can think, for instance, of really trying to have a minimax algorithm or a minimax estimator, and computational complexity, where the aim is to also have an algorithm which is not too computationally costly. You can think, for instance, polynomial time, ideally. And so the big underlying question is, for knowing if there is a statistical computational trade-off, whether it is possible for a given statistics or machine learning problem to create an algorithm that is both statistically optimal, so for instance, minimax or Bayesian optimal, and also computationally efficient. And here, the ideal would be polynomial time, but for reasons that we are going to discuss a bit later, we are actually going to do something a bit different. And the reason why this question is really important is because it is absolutely prevalent in unsupervised learning. And it is actually the case in many unsupervised learning that you have such statistical computational trade-off. So in this mini course, what I'm going to do is to first shortly introduce some problems of unsupervised learning. Then I will talk about statistical computational trade-off in a rather high-level way. And in the third part, which is for me the most important part, I will try to give a tutorial on how to prove computational lower bound with low-degree polynomials. So it's like one specific way to do it, which I find very attractive for statistics. And if I have time, I'm going to also discuss a bit about how this conveys some results in ranking, which is a more complicated problem. So first, let's discuss about unsupervised learning. So basically, unsupervised learning is the problem of trying to discover patterns in unsupervised data, so unlabeled data. And you can think of, for instance, clustering as the first kind of like very, very prevalent unsupervised learning problem, which appears at many levels. And for instance, one case of clustering would be graph clustering, where you have some graph. You can imagine that this stems from an unknown random graph model. And then you observe some edges between nodes. You can think, for instance, of a social network. So you just observe the graph data, and the aim is to recover, based on this unlabeled dataset, some unknown structure on your graph. And here, the structure would, for instance, be some unknown communities of nodes which are more strongly connected together. So here, the unobserved red and blue communities, which are a bit more strongly connected together. Of course, you want to do that without having access to the labels. Otherwise, there is no problem. So beyond clustering, actually, in unsupervised learning, you have quite a lot of problems, which are maybe a bit less relevant, but which are quite interesting. So problems where I've been interested quite a lot with co-authors like Nicolas also are the ranking problems. So ranking, here the aim is to try to rank, so either in a tournament context, some players, or in a ranking for crowdsourcing context, some experts based on, so for instance, in tournaments, some matches between the players. So you observe the outcome of matches. And in crowdsourcing, you observe whether experts were correct or wrong about some questions. And you want to rank them. There are also some other models which are very interesting. So for instance, matching, where you want to match, for instance, large graphs, or seriation, where you want to reorder sequences. So there are lots of applications for unsupervised learning in general. So for clustering, it can be interesting in itself, but also in a machine learning pipeline. And for the other models which I mentioned, it can be interesting for mainly recommender systems, but also genomics or molecular biology. I won't enter too much into details on that, but it's quite relevant in practice. So now, so to me at least, the main challenge in unsupervised learning is that typically methods which would be given by first principles in statistics, in random models, so for instance, maximum likelihood or some other related things like least square, etc., have a high computational complexity. So for instance, if we go back to the graph clustering example from before, and if you put some model, for instance, an Erdős-Rényi model behind your graph, and if you do maximum likelihood, typically it would tell you to look at all possible. So one way to implement it would be to look at all possible partitions of your graph and to try to see which partitions typically would minimize the inter-communities links and maximize the intra-communities links. So you would really need to look at all possible partitions. And this is very expensive because you would need to have computationally, you would need to have an exponential number of operations in terms of the number of nodes here. And so this consideration is also the case for other problems in unsupervised learning. So in ranking, typically, if you take a naive method like maximum likelihood, the best known implementation would be to just look at all possible permutations of the players or of the experts. In matching, to look at all possible match. In seriations, to look at all possible orders. And so, in all cases, you would have an exponential complexity in terms of the number of dimension of your problem. And so, this is really completely prevalent that if you take statistical estimators coming from first principle, you can prove, not trivially, but you can prove using rather standard arguments by now that they are optimal. But at least best known implementations are exponential in the dimension of the problem. So now let's try to formalize a little bit how to go further here and to try to quantify a little bit better computational complexity. So before doing that, I will just do a very quick overview, history. So if you want to talk about computational complexity, one needs to discuss a bit about complexity theory, which is a field in theoretical computer science that dates from the 70s and the works from Karp. But most of these works are really targeting worst case problems, so it's really targeting non-random instances. And it was at first not too much looked at in statistics and machine learning. And actually, in statistics and machine learning, in the 90s, people started to really have computational power to work with very large data sets. And at that moment, basically, it was rather in the other direction that people were going. So basically, in remarking that for quite a lot of problems which have a kind of combinatorial structure, like for instance, high-dimensional linear regression, under assumptions which are not too crazy, then it's possible to solve this problem in polynomial time. It's possible to convexify this problem, so to do some convex relaxation to make the problem doable. And you can think of the lasso. And in this room, there are many people who basically invented the lasso, or at least really proved that it's a method that is very good. So I don't need to explain it to you, but it was really rather at that time exhibiting some problem where the maximum likelihood would seem uncomputable, but where through convex relaxation, actually it's possible to compute something that is very good and that is minimax optimal in particular. However, there are some problems where this doesn't work. So there are some problems where naive convex relaxation are not really working. And in the beginning of in the early 2010, there were some pioneering work, and there, Philippe is in the room, so it was with Quentin Berthet, one pioneering work in computational lower bounds, which was basically to prove that for some very important statistical problems, actually, based on some conjecture at least, it's not possible to solve it in polynomial time. So it was sparse PCA, and for this problem, convex relaxations basically are not working. And from there, basically, the literature on this topic has been gaining momentum, just because there are a lot of problems which are like this. It's not just sparse PCA; it's really a lot of problems where actually convex relaxations are not working, and where best known algorithms cannot be minimax. At least known algorithm cannot be minimax. So for upper bounds, here is a little bit of literature review. So basically on this convex relaxation, which I was mentioning, but in unsupervised learning, you have quite a lot of other methods which are used, which are maybe a little bit more niche. So the most famous one are convex relaxation and the spectral method and iterative methods like gradients. But you have also hierarchical method, tensor-based method on which Andrew is going to speak in his tutorial. And some smart dimension reduction methods, which are very problem-specific. And when it comes to computational lower bounds, because people have been trying, like since the work of Philippe and Quentin, to try to do that in statistical and machine learning problem, people have also developed a zoology of methods for proving computational lower bound, depending on different conjectures. So first, people have been working with mappings. I'm going to say a bit more about this, and this was the case of the paper of Philippe and Quentin. But a lot of other methods have also been developed for reasons which I'm going to explain a bit later. Please don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have any questions. And for the moment, it's very high level, but at some point I will go also more in technical details, so don't hesitate. Okay, so now how to formalize a little bit what we want to do when we want to talk about computational efficiency. So let's first try to define it in a very generic way. So assume that you have a statistical problem where you have some data Y which is following a distribution P, and you want to estimate something in this model through an estimator F, which is a measurable function of the data. And to quantify the quality of this estimator, we define this loss function L of F, which is, you can think of it, for instance, as the minimax risk, as the max risk of F, sorry, or of some Bayesian risk for F. So first, statistical optimality. So for statistical optimality, what we want to do is to find an estimator, F star, such that F star is optimal among all possible estimators, so namely all possible measurable functions of the data. So this is the classical thing that we want to reach in statistics. Yeah.
You mean the ratio, I guess, and not the real optimal estimator. You mean rate optimal or optimal?
What do you mean?
For your risk function.
Rate optimal. Yeah, typically people would be happy with rate optimal. Yeah. So yeah, people are in. Yeah.
Is there any expectation side of your measures?
Yeah.
Minimize the risk or the loss?
Yeah, so here L of f is already integrated. So you can think of it as the max risk. For instance, it would be the expectation of the quadratic loss. It's already expected.
So there is a population version, not the loss. So I mean,
it's the expected version. Yeah. It's a population.
Minimizes the risk.
Yeah. So really over the population and not over the data. Yeah. So this is really the criterion, not the. Yeah. So this is one thing that we want to do in statistics quite often. And here we really look at all possible estimators, so all possible measurable functions of the data. Now the problem is that in some cases, which I described before, there are some measurable estimators which we don't know how to compute in polynomial time. And so the idea is to try to get away from them. Okay, so what we can do is just to say, instead of minimizing over all possible estimators, I'm going to minimize over all possible estimators which are computationally efficient. So namely, so ideally, we would like to say which are computable in polynomial time.
I'm still confused.
Yeah.
I mean, L of f is the risk for given data distribution, or it's something different. So I mean,
so here it's already.
It will have one distribution.
It's the max.
Then the infirm log the data, and the risk will be zero.
Think of it as the max risk. So it would be like the max over all possible probabilities in a given model.
Not for given data distribution.
Not for a given.
For some class.
Yeah, for some class. So it can be either, if you are Bayesian, it can be the expectation around all possible distribution. If you are frequentist, it's the max risk. And so, so if you want to be computationally efficient, then what you want to do is to just restrict over a class of problem that is a class of estimator that is computable in polynomial time, ideally. Yeah?
I just ask, I could also ask, it's computable linearly in sample size or whatever. I mean, polynomial time is not feasible in this n cube or whatever.
So that would be very, very nice to have like some formalism which really allows to make like strong conjecture for any kind of computational complexity. It might exist. I'm not too much familiar with it. Yes, that would of course be super nice. But I'm sure some people have come up with, like for instance, in statistical queries, you can also formalize that somehow. But it's I mean, there is a zoology of models, so to say, of computation models. So here I'm restricting to polynomial times, but of course you can ask the question over some other class. And there it's quite generic what I'm saying, so you can do that in particular. Any other questions? Okay, so then based on these two measures of loss, of like best of minimax loss over two different classes, so to say. There are two configurations. So either these two losses are of same order, and in this case, you would say that there is no statistical computational trade-off. So namely, statistical optimality is not incompatible with computational efficiency, or there is a difference between the two. So namely, this guy is much smaller than this guy. In which case, we would say that there is a statistical computational trade-off. Namely, it's not possible to be both minimax optimal and computationally efficient. And what is really interesting in unsupervised learning is that you have quite a few problems where for like a lot of compute models, you have this. You have the situation where you have a statistical computational trade-off. So to illustrate this a little bit, and I think this will also answer a few questions on the risks, I will take an example which is like the canonical example in this field, which is planted click for detection. So in planted click, you have a random graph, and you want to see if in this graph you have what people call a community. So namely, a subset of nodes which are more strongly connected. So here we have n nodes, and we are going to take a random models, which is underlying the data that you observe. And so the model is as follows. You take uniformly over all possible nodes a random clique of size k, which I will call C here. And then if I and j are both in the clique, then you put an edge with probability 1. And if I and j are not in the clique, so one of them or both of them, you put an edge with probability 1/2. So you have a random kind of like edge setting. And so basically the kind of like the way that your data will look is that you will have your clique, which will be completely connected. So here the green nodes are in the clique, and they form a full graph. And the other nodes have some connections, but not like it's random. The number of connections that they have is random. And so a basic problem in this model is just to detect whether you have a uniform k-clique or not. So it will be to decide between a situation where k is equal to k and where k is equal to 0. And so to model that, I'm going to take a Bayesian perspective here to define the risk. And so we are going to take a random latent variable, z star, which is Bernoulli. So either 1 or 0 with probability 1/2 here. And if z star is equal to 0, I'm going to just take a random graph without a clique, so k equals 0. And if z star equals 1, I'm going to plant a clique of size k. Is the model clear? If you have any questions, don't hesitate, because we are going to use quite a bit this, or some variants of this, in what follows. So here it's just a Bayesian framework which allows me to directly define a Bayesian risk. So here the loss which I discussed before, LK of f, would be a loss for estimating z star. And so we want to construct an estimator f of z star such that the quadratic loss between f and z star is small. Yeah? Yeah. No, f can take any value. So here f takes value in R. It's not really interesting to take values which are not 0 or 1, but it can take any value. And actually I will need to, like, because of the compute models that I'm going to use, I will take f which take value in R. So.
And what is y? It's not all the edges, I imagine.
It's all of them. Yeah, yeah.
You have all the edges. You can count. Okay, so it's just a computational question.
Yeah, so the thing is that you have all the edges, you observe all of them, but for instance, if you think of, I'm going to talk about the maximum likelihood in this model, huh? But the maximum likelihood in this model would be to look in all the edges for cliques. And if you do that, this is, even if, I mean, you have all the edges, but just looking for cliques is very computationally, it's very heavy. But you have all the edges, and it's not a question of information. So what I'm going to discuss about in this talk is not information theoretic. It's really in terms of computation. I'm not in a statistical query model here.
Could you also consider stochastic block models, community detection?
Absolutely, yes. People do. The planted clique model is just a little bit easier, but yeah. But one can do it, yeah. Any other questions? So maybe just to say one word about this loss. So this loss is maybe not 100% standard, and typically one would rather, in statistics, think of a test, but this loss is very related to a test problem where one has a prior over the number of times that the null hypothesis is true and the alternative hypothesis is true. So here we have L, which is, so L of f, which is equal to this. And so here, we are mostly going to be concerned with two caricatural situations. Huh? So if f of y is equal to z star with high probability, typically, then L of f is going to be a small o of 1. And so if f of y is equal to z star, it means that you have a perfect test, in a sense, between testing click or no click. And otherwise, if we cannot extract anything of the data, so it's not really otherwise actually, because there are lots of in between, but so if we cannot extract anything of the data, then the best estimator is a constant. And here we can look at which constant minimizes this loss. So we would look at the minimum of C minus Z star. And actually, this thing is minimized for C equal 1/2. So it's 1/4. So just to fix IDs a little bit, but in this model, so the idea is that, so if you can really decide well between the two possibilities, L of f will be as wished a small o of 1. But if we cannot say anything, in a sense, so just because I took a quadratic loss, which is not completely standard in such a testing problem, what we will do is that we will predict by some constant, in a sense. We minimize this loss, and since Z star is 0 with probability 1/2 and 1 with probability 1/2, the best we can do is to predict in the middle. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just to tell you about the scaling, which is a bit shifted because of the loss that I'm taking. Questions on this? Yeah?
The second one would be the lower bound to show that.
Yeah, one would like to, yeah.
Nothing can be better than
Exactly.
diagnostic.
Yeah. So in this talk, I will really just consider the two extreme situations. So either we can do that, or if we are above a threshold, we can do that. If we are under a threshold, we want to prove something that we cannot estimate by better than a constant. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions on the model or on the loss? So it's not completely standard. I'm just doing this because it will help me later to not reintroduce everything. Okay, so now what do we know in this model? So it's known since a long time. Yeah. Yeah. So it's known since a long time. We know that if K, so if the size of the community is larger than some constant time log n, and here the constant people know exactly what it is. It's just I don't remember, but people know exactly. So then basically we can find an estimator where the risk is a small o of 1. And then you have the so-called planted click conjecture, which tells you that actually now, if K is smaller than square root of n, so much higher, much bigger community, then the best computationally efficient estimator, polytime, is actually not better than constant estimator. So you cannot do anything. So in this problem, people say that there is a statistical computational trade-off because there are estimators which detect very small communities. so of size log n. But it is strongly conjectured that there is no computational time estimator that detects clicks which are much larger. No polytime estimator. Okay. So what I will do is that I will just give you a bit of elements for lower and upper bounds here. So not the computational lower bound yet, but for the other information theoretic results which are more familiar maybe. And then we will move on. So just to fix a bit ideas here. So first, information theoretic lower bound. So for F star, LK of F star. So this is something which is classical. It has nothing to do with computationally efficient things. So it's for the threshold K smaller, higher than log n. This threshold really comes from the following consideration on random graph, which I'm not going to prove, but it can be done through classical arguments. So the idea is that if you take a graph without a planted click, so if k is equal to 0, so then there will still be some clicks, some random clicks, which will appear by randomness in your graph, but these clicks cannot be too big. And so what you can prove is that with high probability, with probability going to 1 with n, there exist lots of clicks of size smaller than log n in Y. So you will see lots of small clicks, actually. So you can already see it. You will have like lots of clicks of size 2. You will have about n minus 1 over 2 clicks of size 2, because it's like the average number of edges. And actually, you can go a bit beyond. So you can go to triangle. You can go also to click with 4 people. So you will have a lot of them. Clicks is like fully connected graphs. Huh? So that's the first result. And also, with high probability, there exists no click of size larger than log n in Y. So you have really this phase transition for log n, where in your random graph, you will observe tons of small clicks, and at some point you observe none which are higher. And based on this result, it's easy to deduce the information theoretic threshold, at least intuitively. Of course, the proof needs to be a bit different, but at least intuitively. So basically, an efficient algorithm would be looking for clicks of size k, or of size log n. So efficient, or statistically optimal algo. Look for click of size n. So you look if there is at least one click of size larger than log n in your data. And so if k is equal to 0, namely if z star is equal to 0, then you should not find any with high probability. On the other end, if k is larger than log n, so if z star is equal to 1 and k larger than log n, then you will find one click, namely the planted one. So the one corresponding to your click C.
Well, technical question is log n, just log n, or log n plus
some constant. Some constant and maybe, and then plus minus stuff. So here,
I just wonder.
Yeah, the level of precision at which I am in my head here is like some small constant here, some large constant there.
I guess it will be a log at least.
Yeah, there is. So people have managed to do some very refined things here. So you can have the right constant here and then some like additional terms, but I'm not at this level of precision in my head here. Yeah, so imagine here, small constant, here, large constant. But people can do much better. Yeah, so that's for information theoretic result. So here is the test. You look for clicks of for size larger than log n. And if you find one, you say f equal 1. And if you don't find any, you say f equals 0. And this test is going to be, or this estimator is going to be statistically optimal. Questions on it? Now, the problem of this thing, of course, is that you have to look for all clicks which have size log n, at least. And the number of such clicks is quite high. So it will be like n to the log n. Something like this. And n to the log n is actually exponential log n square, so it's like a little bit too big to be polynomial time. Just a little bit too big, actually. Not a lot too big, but a bit. Okay, so it's not doable in polynomial time to do at least if we just do naive search. And then, of course, the question could be, is there a way to do something computational that is not naive search, but at least people don't know how to do it. Any questions on information theoretic thresholds? Yeah?
So, what happens to the square root n?
I'm going to talk about it now. But any other questions for information theoretic? No? So now let's talk about the other threshold. So I will differ a little bit the discussion on the computational lower bound. But first, just to fix ideas, the upper bound, so the naive algorithm that is actually managing to find the click if k is larger than square root of n. So computational algo for k larger than square root of n. So in this case, actually, there exists a lot of naive algorithms that work. I will give you one example. So this example would be, so here I'm going to transform my data first. So I just do this linear transformation on my data. And so here, what I do is that so basically the yij tilde, they are taking now values +1 and -1. And so if I'm not between two edges in a click, yij is a Rademacher. So if ij are not in C, so Rademacher distribution. So I'm just centering it by doing this. And if ij is in the click, yij tilde is equal to 1 actually. So I just changed a little bit the scaling of my data for convenience. Actually, I'm going to work quite a lot with the y tilde. So that's why I'm doing this scaling right now. And so in that case, we can define a statistic Sn, which will just be just counting the number of edges actually, where we rescale them a bit. And basically, if we have a little bit too many edges, we will think that there is a click. And if we have a little bit too few edges, then there is no click. And so the statistic that I will build based on this is Fn, which will be equal to the indicator that Sn is of higher order than n. And so, okay, so here, if z star is equal to 0, so if I don't have a clique, then I can do just Hövding's inequality or Markov, whichever inequality you want, actually. Markov would work as well. So Sn is bounded with high probability by like square root of the number of data points. And here we have like n minus 1 over 2 data points. So square root of n squared, which is n, with high probability. And if z star is equal to 1, so if now I have a clique, so here the mean was 0 of this statistic, and now my mean is not going to be 0 because I have my planted clique. And the mean of Sn in this case is going to be basically k minus 1 over 2 because I have to count the number of edges in my clique which are planted. So this is going to be smaller, again, with high probability than the deviation. And so if k minus 1 over 2 is much higher than n, then we know that Sn is going to be larger than n. Okay. So, okay, so this very basic test is basically telling you that when k is larger than square root of n, I can actually recover my, I can actually see that there is a clique. So at least this, we can reach this conjectured lower bound. Now you are going to tell me, okay, how do we prove the lower bound? And so this is what we are going to do in what follows. But any questions on this? Because I think it's important to have a little bit the problem, at least the order of magnitudes clear before going to computational lower bounds. Yeah.
If you want not only test but identify the clique, then it looks like you need not square root of k but just k.
I will talk about it later, actually, about clique identification. It's a very interesting question. So in that case, for this model, you just need k larger than square root n log n to identify the clique. So almost the same orders, but for some variants of this problem, there is really a gap between estimation and detection. Yeah.
I was wondering, so both of these arguments that you presented seem to rely quite strongly on exactly this generating mechanism.
Yeah.
And the random fluctuations in this generating.
Absolutely.
Is there much that one can say beyond that? So if you want to be a bit more worst case, then...
You mean in terms of upper bound or lower bound?
Either, I don't know, yeah.
So here in this talk, what I want to mostly talk about are lower bounds. And so they are going to, if they work in the most easy model, then they are good. Now, of course, if you take models which are a bit more general than this, sometimes maybe the rates become worse. But okay, this is quite interesting, and I can say a bit about it later. Other questions? Maybe Olga, just one question. When should I stop? Like a bit before the hour? Or? So in like 10 minutes? 15? Okay. Okay, so that's for this model. And so in this model, you have the following picture. So you have like this impossible regime where the clique is smaller than log n. So it's impossible to find the clique. You have the easy regime when k is larger than square root of n. So in that case, there exists a very easy algorithm, computable very easily, which finds the clique. And you have the hard regime, so when k is between log n and square root of n, where there are some algorithms which find the clique, but we don't know how to compute them in polynomial time. So now let's talk about lower bounds, which are really in the focus of this mini course. Okay, so to prove computational lower bounds, So to prove computational lower bounds, there are lots of ways to do it. And so as mentioned, it's really a topic which emerged in the field of complexity theory, where people were really trying to prove that a model is NP-hard. But most of the proofs and arguments in this field rely on worst-case instances which are non-random. So it's really constructing, for instance, a worst case of clustering, like of putting the points which make it impossible to optimize the K-mean criterions, of doing really things not based on a random model, but on worst case instances. And so this classical material is not really conveying to random instances. However, it's possible to do something which is a bit related to what people do in complexity theory, namely to create a catalog of problems which are conjectured to be difficult, a bit like the catalog of problems which are NP-complete, and to say, okay, I have my catalog, and now when I have a new problem, I see whether I can relate it to one problem of this catalog in the following sense, namely, if I can solve my new problem, then I would be able to solve a problem from my catalog. And so in this way, it would really tell you that your problem is at least as difficult as a problem which is conjectured to be super hard. And this was initially the first kind of proof that people did in statistics and machine learning problems for proving computational lower bounds. For instance, in this sparse PCA paper, which I mentioned at the beginning. The problem of this is that, of course, your catalogs is limited in the sense that you cannot add items to your catalog completely arbitrarily, of course. And so when you have a new problem with a kind of different structure, a bit like what Sven was mentioning, when you start to add a bit of structure, maybe you don't really fit your catalog. And so for this reason, people have been taking also some other approaches to prove computational lower bound, which are rather based on computation models. So basically the idea is to take some classes of algorithms and to prove that over these classes of algorithms, you cannot solve your problem. And the hope is that the classes of algorithms that you have taken are kind of the same as polynomial time algorithm. And the core problem in this field, which is also the reason why you have all these things, is that people don't know how to describe polynomial time algorithms. And so there are all these attempts here. But in a way, all these models are connected. So basically, people working in these fields are also trying to connect all these models together to show that they are not just some random kind of instances, but that they really, there is really something between them as well. So there are lots of them. And in this talk, I'm going to focus on low-degree polynomials, which is one example which I personally like a lot, just because it's something which I think for a statistician is quite nice. It's quite attractive for someone who likes minimax. There are lots of connections to that. And so in what follows, I can start maybe now, but I will mostly do it next time. I'm going to talk about low-degree polynomial lower bounds. And my aim here is to do a kind of introduction to this topic, just to explain a bit the proof techniques on basic problems. So please don't hesitate to interrupt me if anything is unclear in what follows, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. I don't care if I don't arrive at the end of the presentation. Okay, so what is low-degree polynomials? So let's go back to the slide where I was talking about statistical optimality and computational efficiency like this. So here, at that time, there was some unknown class of computationally efficient algorithms that we want to use instead of the set of all possible estimators. And so for a low-degree polynomial algorithm, this class is specified, and it is the class of polynomials of degree smaller than d in the data. So you take your data, and you construct basically polynomials of degree smaller than d, so by just taking products of your data, so of at most d instances of your data, and you construct all possible polynomials that you can build based on this, and this is your model from now on. So questions on first is, yeah?
Sorry, I might have missed something, but here on this slide, you said earlier that think of L as the maximum of all possible measures on the data. But then in the example, you had your measure fixed for that particular data.
So yeah, in the other example, it was more like Bayesian. So in this example, Z star would be doing a mixture. So I took more a Bayesian approach here. So by having a mixture of two models, so there are two possible models, P0 and PK, and I want to be uniformly good on P0 and PK here. It's just I took a Bayesian approach instead of taking
You will not be taking a Bayesian approach on this other.
I will be taking always a Bayesian approach, actually. But you can use the Bayesian, because it's lower bounds, right? So you can use your Bayesian approach to say something about minimax, actually. It's always what we do when we do lower bound. Not always, but often. We do a Bayesian, we find a good Bayesian setup, and then it brings us back to frequentist. So, yeah.
Oh, I see. So when you say about the computational intelligence, you mean the worst case intelligence, right?
Sorry?
You mean the worst case intelligence?
Worst case?
So I mean, like, so for example, how you argue that this information theoretical here is not you write on the platform.
So where? Yeah.
So I mean, like, so this question is relating question acting the maximum size of the leads in a graph. Right?
Yeah.
And you think this is not equation because it's not equation in the worst case.
But in the worst case, like it's so here what happened? You can really prove that. So here I was just giving some high-level arguments, but what you can really prove formally is that the chi-square distance between P0 and PK is going to 0, and then you can prove that the best you can do in terms of risk is to predict at random. Yeah. Should I stop now, Olga? Je fais juste quelques tout petits trucs peut-être. J'ai combien? Je peux arrêter maintenant ou après?
J'ai 5 minutes.
Ah d'accord, bah, je finis peut-être juste un slide du coup. Okay, so maybe one last thing which I'm going to do before stopping is to present the low degree polynomial paradigm and to precise a bit here what we will concretely do. So here in a generic setting, we have some data Y, which are indexed on some set E. So this set E, in the case of planted click, would be like the set of all edges. Huh? And we have our quantity of interest Z star. So in the example I presented, it was just detecting whether there is a click or not. And now we look at the set of all degree D polynomials in Y. So I will write in a second, again, to be sure that we are all on the same page, what this is concretely. So we want to minimize now the squared loss in what follow. So it will be the expectation of this. And here Z star we are actually in a Bayesian setup. Huh? So this Z star is making the mixture of model related to the question of Azadeh. Then we can define the low degree risk, namely the infimum over all polynomial of degree smaller than d of the risk. And the low degree conjecture, which is made by Hopkins in 2018, states that for a wide class of models, there are some counterexamples, but they are very weird. If we take polynomials of degree log e and they fail, so namely, if based on degree log e polynomials we cannot do better than constant, then nothing which is polynomial time is going to work. And so this thing is a conjecture. It's proved nowhere, of course, but it is a basis of work for this field. Because in complexity, in most things in complexity theory, it's quite difficult to work beyond conjecture. So you take a conjecture and you work with it. Yeah. I take Marcus and...
I have a conceptual question. So when you speak about polynomials, everything depends on how you represent the data. You just said for a graph, you have the set of edges.
Yeah.
So you store the ij's, which are 1 or 0, or you could have the incidence matrix. So it's a different object and the set of estimators. Thank you.
So you mean it's
If I have two different representations that are not polynomially equivalent, I cannot transform one into the other. How do you store it?
The one you just mentioned are completely equivalent now.
Yeah, the one you mentioned are equivalent.
Did you think of a polynomial kind of algorithm to turn one into the other?
Maybe to answer this question, I will just show what I mean by polynomial. So just to explain this, I will just finish by just explaining clearly what P smaller than D is. So P smaller than D, it's actually the set of all function f which are written of the form sum alpha s ys, where S is a set of n, and S is smaller than D, and alpha S are in R. And here, ys are the monomials, the so-called monomials, and ys is the product. So here n squared, sorry. ij in S of the yij. So I take all possible monomials where I take the product of less than D entries, and I construct all possible polynomials based on the monomials. Yeah.
Very short. So this means you assume y to be Euclidean in a way. So that should be living in some part of the...
I assume y to be binary here in my talk.
But I said you can store a set just of edges
Yeah.
that are present, which is a completely different representation of an incidence matrix that you are looking
Yeah.
at. And then it's just
So I mean, I agree that there can be a problem when thinking about that when you think of data which are not binary. Although in most problems, you can go back to binary somehow. So for this talk, what I would suggest is that we all think really of y as being binary, because it's easier. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. So I have just a couple questions. The first one is, why the squared loss? I mean, it feels pretty unnatural to estimate something that's binary, right? You might want to have just the, probability of being correct, just the indicator loss. Is this just for technical convenience? Can you actually go to the indicator loss in the end? Is it for exposition purposes?
So it's a bit deeper than that. It's because low degree polynomials are not binary. They don't take value in 0, 1.
But you could threshold them.
Yeah, not. So it's not, you are out of your model if you do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second question is, so the low degree conjecture, when it was stated, did not have the for a wide class of models, and then it was disproved, and then this qualifier was added there. And so, which makes at least me uncomfortable with what is this wide class of model. And in particular, when you work with a specific model, is there additional evidence that it's true or not for once you select a specific model, or you just like navigate in the dark here?
For this model of blended click, like of binary data, you mean? So yeah, I mean, as mentioned, people are navigating a bit in the dark. Huh? It's more that, so for the low degree polynomial, I think for binary data, there is an intuitive reason why they are nice. It's because basically, when you are computing these things, you are just looking at clicks of size smaller than d, and you are doing some AND operation on the Ys, but you cannot go beyond a certain size. And this feels like the right kind of operation that you could be allowed to do. So that's like more a reason that makes me happy, so to say. A reason that makes, I think, the community happy who are working on that is because you can actually recover quite a lot of other compute models with low-degree polynomial. So for instance, you can recover the IMP, you can recover statistical queries, and you can recover also a lot of algorithms like spectral method, gradient descent, etc. So that's why people are happy about it. But of course, it's a bit, okay, it's a conjecture, right? So it can be wrong, I mean, and for some models, it is wrong.
And what is the most consequential, correct, like provable result about it? Say, if O of log E degree polynomials fail, then all log E rounds of SOS relaxations fail. Is that true?
For SOS, to the best of my knowledge, there is no, so it's like the model which is more complex. But it's more, I think, something like, for instance, the IMP, you can approximate it. And so if low degree polynomial fails, then the IMP fails, so to say, or rather, if low degree polynomials are not correct, if the conjecture is false, then IMP must not be a good idea. It's also for landscape models, you can make a connection. So if low degree polynomials is not a good conjecture, then landscape models is also false, like more like this. But SOS, no, there is nothing. Yeah. I think Magali had a question, but no. Of low degree polynomials? Yes, so for instance, so when you look at the low degree polynomials, what you are doing is that you are counting the number of, you are looking at given shapes. Okay, I didn't speak about graphs yet, but you are looking at, you are doing, in this data, you are doing an AND operation on your data, and then you are doing any polynomials based on that. So for instance, so this algorithm here is a low degree polynomial of degree 1. If you count the number of clicks, it's a low degree polynomial of degree log n, if you are, of degree the size of the click, squared, actually. And if you are looking at like finding triangles, finding squares, it's low degree polynomials. But more interestingly, you have some other more important algorithms which are low degree, like for instance, spectral methods. So you can approximate spectral methods by low degree polynomials, or gradient descent. You can also approximate it often by low degree polynomials. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question maybe relating a little bit to Philippe's question of thresholding the polynomials, because I mean the Bayes estimator is always taking values, binary values as well, right? So is there anything known about either of these computation models and how they relate to approximating the Bayes method? And I guess if you're interested in lower bounds, then that would mean that they cannot approximate the Bayes method?
Yeah. So actually, so I'm not an expert in it, but the thing that is more related to what you say is rather like energy landscapes or the IMP. So these are two ways to try to estimate. So it's more at the heart of that, like trying to approximate Bayes method. But to the best of my knowledge, I think in most cases, low degree polynomial would also approximate well Bayes method. It's just, it's not the target of it. Yeah.
Do you have questions?
Just a quick question. Are you allowed to randomize the algorithm as well?
You're allowed randomized versions of that, like permute the data or something.
So I think in the formulation which I gave here, you cannot randomize it, but I think it's not difficult to reformulate the formulation by having a randomized algorithm where you set the randomness at the beginning and to restate to extend the class. And I think most proofs would go through it.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
The questions? Well, let's thank Alexander for a very nice talk.